I can give you all the warning signs. Indicators of violence might be, verbal threats, verbally abusive, confrontational, argumentative, failure to follow instructions, right? Combative, sexually oriented comments, inappropriate comments. Those are all the warning signs.
Hey guys, my name is Nikki Renfro. I'm a recently retired state trooper, and I decided to start a podcast, Safe Nation Podcast. We're covering safety, security, and law enforcement.
Hi, Nikki, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Well, it's Thursday. Actually, it's Wednesday. Tomorrow's Thursday. I got a big day coming up Thursday. So I hope this thing works out for you today.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's going to work out for both of us today. How about that?
Very good, very good, very good.
Okay. And whatever you got going on tomorrow, that's going to be fine as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, good. I'm glad you were able to jump on my calendar and get this scheduled. So
Sure.
this should be good. This should be good and informative. So as I pick your brain, about workplace violence. Felix P. Nader.
Absolutely.
He is the man for workplace violence. So you are a nationally recognized workplace violence advisor and
That's,
consultant.
that's what they say.
That's what they say,
That's what
right?
they
And you
say.
also come with what, 30 years of federal law enforcement experience?
26 years of federal law enforcement experience as a United States Postal Inspector, and about 30 years, if you add the last 8 years of my career and the last 22 years specializing in it from a corporate government perspective, that's 30 years. Not to mention the safety security stuff that I did as a postal inspector. So what's between my ears is incredible sometimes. I'm asked a question and I don't know where to stop, answering.
Well, I can say this as a postal inspector, that term of going postal, you remember we used to use that term going postal? What does going postal mean?
It means two things. So you're talking to the right person. At the time the news media was running with that, I was a younger inspector in the New York division. The big cities were having a lot of armed robberies, letter carrier armed robberies, post office armed robberies. So they had these task forces around the country working with local PD to catch these guys in the act, or to go out and educate the employees on how to handle the risk associated with it. At the same time, and now I'm in Washington in 1985. At the same time that this is happening, we have the unions concerned about these armed robberies, right? And what is the Postal Inspection Service doing about protecting the workforce when the going postal incidents in the Postal Service start happening? 1986, we have the first shooting incident that we call the tragedy in Edmonton, Oklahoma, where Patrick Sherrill entered the post office and shot and killed and wounded 20 employees, including himself,
Mm.
all because of that rubber band popping. Vietnam vet, not in country, but having served during the Vietnam era, a lot of issues going on. And the post office wasn't equipped to deal with that kind of
Right.
new employee coming into the workplace. So they probably cast him aside and the rubber band popped. And one day he came in with a long weapon and committed mayhem. So I'm familiar with it from the investigator perspective. And I'm also familiar with it from the public information officer interacting with local media and interacting with senior post office officials and postal inspection service officials. So it's an incredible place to be. Never expecting that 7 years later, I would be one of the team members involved in workplace violence prevention.
Well, let's talk about workplace violence and prevention. So let's talk about some of the warning signs.
Yes.
We've all had coworkers that were may have had their own set of issues. They may be the hothead, flying off the handle about whatever. They may talk under their breath sometime about, you know, what they want to do or what they're going to do or what they're upset about. What are the warning signs that we need to know about?
There's an organization that you probably heard of, as is, and of course, SHRM, Society of Human Resource Managers. They
Yes.
collaborated and they put together a standard that would help corporations, employers. understand their responsibilities. Sort of like a guideline that would help them put together a program. And they were very, very uh, proactive, if you would, on recognizing that you had to start somewhere, right? So because the CERN folks own the employees, it was thought that it'd be important for them to understand what warning signs and risk factors and red flags were all about. But in everybody's desire to get this information out, they fail to connect a piece of the dot. I can give you all the warning signs, indicators of violence might be, verbal threats, verbally abusive, confrontational, argumentative, failure to follow instructions, right? Combative, sexually oriented comments, inappropriate comments. Those are all the warning signs. But if you don't have an expression of violence, what does a warning sign mean? It just means keep an eye on Felix. So do you keep an eye on Felix and all the other Felixes, the rest of your
Yeah.
employment? So
Felix
if
is just blowing off steam. He's just running his mouth. He's not going to back it up with anything.
Felix just got up on the wrong side of the bed at home with his wife
Yeah.
said to Felix on the way to work, honey, did you pay the direct TV? If you don't pay it on the day due, that morning at 8 o'clock, direct TV cuts it off.
Mm.
And so that's a true story. Someone came into the workplace angry with having an argument with his wife on the way to work, and he has a confrontation with the supervisor before he even gets into the workplace. So it's all
Mm.
emotional. So the warning signs are good, but you have to elevate your accountability from the standpoint of recognizing the behaviors. Okay, you can't discipline everybody. You can't identify them as risk until you verify that they're at risk and that
Hmm.
the organization is at risk. So warning signs are good. And this is where I come in at, Nikki. So as a
Hmm.
postal inspector on that violence interdiction team, I dealt with senior members of the organization on focusing in on incident management. And the incident management piece required us to go in and do some risk abatement. So you respond, right? You respond to an incident of this example I just gave you. You assess and evaluate the intervention, what transpired. And then you render a report, no recommendations about the behavior, just recommendations about safety and security. And then you have
Hmm.
these conversations with the senior managers, and they say, off the record, how do you feel? And off the record, you might say, not a concern, not a threat. And on the record, you might say, Nikki is a serious concern, right? But I can't tell them what action to take. They've got to decide. So that vast knowledge and experience of communicating with senior managers was an idea that I thought I could package into a consulting philosophy that would help greater proactive value to corporate America and other government agencies. But unfortunately, at the time, I was just starting out. The world was becoming familiar with workplace violence. And so
Right.
I was the new kid on the block, and they kept pushing me down to the basics, while I was determined to make sure that they understood they had a responsibility as well. You can't put it
Hmm.
on the person that goes, postal. You got to figure out what went wrong along the way that made that behavior a contributory responsibility on the employer. You,
But what can the employer do though to reduce that risk? So if there's talk in the workplace about, hey, this guy, we're concerned about him. The other employees are like, look, somebody's got to do something about him. What
yeah,
can that employer do?
very good question. So I have identified that workplace violence prevention is a leadership function. It's a leadership
Uh,
responsibility. So if you're proactive and you have trust and confidence with your workplace and your adult employees trust you because you mean well, they're going to most likely tell you that Felix is having issues. Now, the leader can approach Felix from a non-accusatory point of view and make an inquiry. A good leader would say, hey, Felix, how's it going? I've been noticing that you're a little slacking off on your work. Is there anything going on? Create an introductory opportunity to have a conversation with Felix. But oftentimes, we're wrapped around the axle of getting things done, performance.
mhm,
So managers forget their leadership hat and they become managers. And
mhm,
instead, they walk up to Felix and they say, hey, Felix, I've been watching your attitude. I don't like your disposition. You're coming to work late. Get on the bandwagon here because you're making my numbers look bad. So what
Yeah.
does Felix do? Right? Felix says, is that how you feel about me? This is how I feel about you.
Mm.
That's how it escalates.
Yeah. So, but if the employer knows that Felix in this case is an issue and he's creating some
Yes.
concern within the workplace and the employer fails to do anything, does not take on that leadership role, how liable is that employer if Felix decides to go off the deep end?
He was responsible for it and he's liable for it. Um, Failure to address the known risk is irresponsible behavior on the part of the manager, the leader.
Mhm.
Failure to adjudicate or to address or to throw resources at his alleged problem is negligent management,
Mhm.
negligent supervision. There are
Mhm.
things that can be done. If he would approach Felix in the way that I just described, Felix may have been looking for that opportunity to have a dialogue with him about his personal issues that are driving
Right.
his behavior, right? But the inappropriate response exposes the organization to doubts and questions about their approach to workplace violence prevention, their lack of understanding of what their responsibilities are. Because there is cases, and there are cases rather, where OSHA will come in and they will cite an employer based on an employee complaint or based on an unannounced inspection, and they validate the existence of the complaints and an
Mhm.
employer can be cited. And I'll give you an example of one that comes to mind. I know we're going to get ahead of our questioning, but two that I always highlight. One was Accent Company. They had an employee that they knew was a problem, but they were too busy focusing in on their metrics that they didn't deal with that employee problem. Another employee complains to management and says, Felix keeps bothering me. He keeps bothering me and he's escalating it. And I'm concerned because he's making threats at me. All right. What are you going to do
Mhm.
about it? They fail to do anything, even with that direct request for intervention. Well, Felix comes in and shoots up the workplace, killing 6 employees. The family says, hey, wait a minute. Now, this is not right. He was reporting it and you guys failed to do nothing about it. The family sued the employer and the employer was at risk and they paid for the damages after the loss of their loved one. So there is accountability, particularly when people are negligent and there are enough witnesses within the organization to corroborate the existence of the potential problem that was unresolved.
But
So there is
what about if the employees fail to notify management of Felix's behavior?
And see, and going back to how we started off, my responsibility as an advisor and consultant at the higher level is to create a mindset of understanding of what management's responsibility is in protecting themselves and protecting their employees. So here's how I would handle that scenario. I would say, Miss Nikki, thank you very much for inviting me in. Do you have policies? Yes, I do. Can I take a look at them? That I would say, Miss Nikki, guess what? One of the policies that you do not have is how to report incidents that someone feels they're a victim to. May I suggest that you develop a policy? Once you have a policy in place that says you are, as an employee, responsible for reporting concerning behavior, and then describe what the concerning behavior is, failure on your part to report the concerning behavior could result in one of two things: physical injury, right, to the individuals involved, and the loss of your job for failing to report it. So we
Right.
encourage, yep, through a policy, there's an opportunity for the employer to say, this is an established policy, and these are the reasons why, and you're required to let us know. If not, you have been contributory to the existence of that problem that we were unable to resolve because you chose not to report it to us. Now, look, I understand, and using Felix and Nikki, I understand that if Felix is Nikki's godfather, Nikki's son's godfather, Nikki is not going to report Felix. I get it because they know the relationship and it's very intimate, and I happen to be married to your sister. So
Mhm.
therefore, that situation is one that becomes tenuous. How do you deal with that? You educate, you elevate, and you create a workplace environment where people understand their responsibilities and you create scenarios. Look, if you don't do this, this won't happen. But if you fail to do this, this will happen. So you
Hmm.
create this, these adult kind of discussions where the adults appreciate the way you're speaking to them and not at them. And they become
Hmm.
part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Mm. Can you think of, like, off the top of your head, any workplace violence incidents you've worked where you were brought in, you analyzed the situation, and you got with management? Can you kind of walk me
Yes.
through maybe
Yeah.
a one that comes to mind for you, and kind of how the whole thing ended up playing out?
I always share this one because it encapsulates all the wrongs and a part of the right that should have been done. So there's an employee, and this particular employee happened to be an employee of the Postal Service because that was an opportunity that he saw would fit within his skill set. So he gets the job and he's doing quite well. But over the years, his skills begin to diminish because of medical conditions, right? The supervisors and managers that he comes into contact with over those 10 years pretty much understand what he's going through. So they overlook some of the inadequacies. There's a change that suddenly requires him to be accountable for his behavior. So now the new supervisor is saying, I don't care about your personal problems or your medical condition. I don't care that you're having this issue. You need to be at work. This causes him some concern and consternation. He's taking medication to calm his stress,
Hmm.
right? He's not able to calm his stress because the supervisor won't give him the time necessary for him to go into the locker or to take a break to de-stress himself. And there's this confrontation that ensues between them. Because he's a union employee, he seeks the assistance of the union. The union intervenes and the union says to him, look, here are the rules. You got to come to work and you got to do your job. If you don't do your job, then I'm going to have to step in and encourage you to do your job before there's any kind of action, formal action that befalls you. Along the way, he doesn't feel that the union is on his side and he feels the harassment on the part of the supervisor. So they get into a verbal altercation and the employee threatens the life of the supervisor.
Hmm.
I get involved. I get involved, right? So I respond. I used to call it back then, I roll out.
Hmm.
I roll out to this particular location and I do my incident management assessment of the situation. And I finally get a chance to speak to him. I'm feeling sorry for him, but unfortunately, I have no emotion in it at that moment because he did something wrong. I need to figure out if he was intentional and if he had capabilities. And of course, it was all mouth. It was all
Hmm.
frustration uttered at the moment because he felt that his manhood and his credibility was being threatened and challenged, and that this supervisor, who was younger than he was, didn't know his job, and who was he to be a doctor in my case. So I reported it to management as a situation that needed their attention, and the level above the immediate manager took it seriously. So he said, thank you very much, Mr. Nader. I'll assess and evaluate it, and we'll have our people monitor it. His medical situation increases and becomes more acute. They take him off his principal duty of driving a vehicle. He was a messenger. He doesn't like that at all because now he feels his job is being threatened. The next thing is going to be discipline, and then maybe he gets terminated. So now he's never happy any longer with the supervisor, and there's daily confrontations. He knows that he can't cross the line of civility because he's going to see me again. And I and
Right.
I warned him that a second time may not be a nice encounter. So he was mindful of that as he told me later on, and he worked very, very diligently to make sure that he didn't cross the line of civility. He didn't say anything inappropriate. He didn't act inappropriate, and he managed to maintain his composure. And that was verified by the shop steward who was always in between him and his supervisor on those issues. But then there was a second incident. He's driving along and there's a pedestrian that's minding her business. And for some reason, she felt that he was trying to run her off the road, which he was. She had
Oh,
done something behind him and he didn't like what she did. So he was trying to run her off the road. She
he's a
pulled
loose
over.
cannon.
That you're a loose cannon. He's typically a loose cannon. So this particular person pulls off the road, gets the license plate number, goes into the police department. The police department calls and finds out that it's this particular uh, employment agency. They go there, and I get called. And I said, okay, here we go again. What's the situation? And he didn't know that I had interviewed the lady. So I knew exactly what he did because I had interviewed her and she had told me already what happened and for how long it was going on. It wasn't just an isolated momentary lapse of judgment. It had been intentional attempt at running her off the road.
Mhm.
So his excuse then is that he wasn't taking his medication. He apologizes, but unfortunately, she wanted to press charges. The police officer, based upon his understanding of the situation, decided that it'd be better left in the hands of management for them to adjudicate the problem. He was not arrested. Third incident. Third incident. Now they take him off driving and they assign him to the building proper to do lower level work that he did not feel comfortable doing, nor did he feel that he had the skill for. By lower level work, I meant he was getting paid less money.
Mhm.
But that was the arrangement between he, the shop steward, and management. In order for him to keep his job, he's got to get reassigned off that vehicle and come and do something where we can watch him. Third incident, because it's a letter processing operation, there's machinery that conveys the mail. So I get a call, and the call goes like this: Mr. Nader, the machinery stopped functioning, and when we discovered what it was, we thought we should call you. He had taken a wrench, a huge operating wrench, and he stuck it into the the operating system so that it wouldn't function. So I respond again, and I have this conversation with him. I says, I think, unfortunately, you're getting to a point where you're leaving management no option, but then to severely discipline you, and you know what that means. And he says, yes, I'm afraid. My wife has left me. My wife has left me, and I'm left with the responsibility of raising my 5-year-old child alone because she's had it with me. I don't know what to do. I'm taking my medication. Management above that level decides that they're going to take my advice that I gave them off the record by forcing him to go under a medical evaluation to manage his medical condition. He agrees to that. But unfortunately, they took him out of the workplace environment and they ordered him to stay at home for several weeks until the report was finalized, until the medical report was finalized. During those several weeks, in the presence, oh my gosh, in the presence of his 5-year-old, he blew his brains out.
Oh my goodness.
That is the most complicated of all scenarios that I could render. That was a real life situation that you're most likely not going to encounter. But an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If you earnestly do all the things that need to be done, if the local manager had taken care of that supervisor as I had directed, that he is the problem, that's a contributing factor to the anxiety that's making this person feel uncomfortable, maybe we wouldn't have gotten to that point. And then to do all the things that they did rather than doing it in an adult approach, an adult fashion to reduce the stress, they were probably confrontational. And
Hmm.
after a while, there's only but so much that an adult can take when they feel that their ego is being bruised, their veracity is being challenged, their integrity is being questioned. They don't know what else to do but pick up the bat and hit you over the head. And in this situation, he unfortunately committed suicide.
Mm. That
Uh,
that's a terrible ending. That's
it's
a
a
terrible. And
terrible,
do you think there's anything that could have been done? Hindsight's always 2020. I understand. Even in the hiring process, is there a way to pick up on any red flags during the hiring process, behavioral type concerns or what have you, that could hopefully prevent this from happening?
let's assume that in this situation, the medical conditions were upfront during the hiring process. If that person's inability to be sharp in his responses, the behavioral type questions that would give an opportunity for the interviewer to go back would create scenarios that would have this individual articulate, by example, the responses to the questions.
Mm.
That may have shown something face to face that could have corroborated the background screening that was being done simultaneously, hopefully, that would have provided some insight into the reasons why he is acting the way or the way she's acting today, coupled with traditional questions of the now, how do you handle current situations? It could have been a identification of a red flag or a warning sign, who knows? But it certainly would have been an opportunity to have identified behaviors that would have been of concern, even if he was a good candidate. And these behaviors allowed you to identify skills that would be better suited for that individual's future employment. So that's a great question. So there is opportunities with well-trained people, not just assigning an individual to do an interview, because behavioral interviews require specialized training and understanding of what the objective is. The objective isn't to disqualify people. The objective is to verify whether or not this person can do the job. That, along with other factors, can give you justification for denial of the opportunity, but it shouldn't be singularly based on the behavior. But the interviews are very important.
What should the employer in that scenario you just gave us in that instance, what should the employer do next? What are the next steps? Because now you have the employees who are devastated. They're
Yes.
devastated as to what just happened. So how do you restore
Trust,
your
confidence,
workplace again? Right.
exactly. So right about now, you have at least I encountered a variety of different fronts, allies, that all have opinions of what transpired. And for some reason, I had then and I still have today a reputation where I'm perceived as an impartial listener. And that
Mhm.
kind of allowed me to get the three or four sides to come to me at different times and to share their thoughts and opinions. So what management needs to do is to allay the concerns of all of the employees within that workplace environment, provide for the immediate care of any victims, psychological victims, which will be some, um, provide assistance and support to everyone that requires assistance. Be liberal with your leave request for leave in the cases of people that were directly associated with this individual's personal experiences, and especially the friends who were tied to him emotionally. Create an opportunity where the people feel as though somebody cares, that this wasn't an act contributed by their failure to lead or their failure to address it, and whatever it needs to be done to de-stressify, if you would, de-stressify the hearts and minds of these employees is the best thing to do to restore the workplace to a level that may have existed before he came in, so that at least they feel the investment was made, there was a commitment made by management, and there's interest in restoring the workplace to a normal operational level. So there are responsibilities that can go on way beyond that. Now, for example, let's take an incident that involves a shooting in the workplace. That becomes a crime scene. So you've got to protect that crime scene. So the operation where the employees formerly worked at no longer becomes their work environments. So now you've got to create an opportunity for them to work somewhere else. If it's a corporation where small and mid-sized corporation where the business is responsible for providing services to their clients and there's a shooting in that workplace, that whole business might be temporarily immobilized until the crime scene is processed, right? You might have evidence that needs to be secured and protected. You might have areas that require chemical evaluation and analysis that that might be required to be protected. So there are a lot of factors that go into it that deal with the inanimate, the non-human, and then the humans, the employees. So it's not an easy. So when someone contacts you, Nikki, as an employer and says, "My name is Felix Nader, and I want to help you with your workplace violence prevention program," the first red flag that should rise up between your ears is he or she going to help me develop a program, or is he or she going to come in and just train my people?
Hmm.
Those are the questions that you need to ask. The training is easy, but the conveyance of that to the workforce is going to result in the employee saying, "Oh, they don't care about me. They think I'm the problem." But if you
Right.
create a program where that's a considered strategy, everybody begins to see their role, their function, and their responsibility, and they become part of the solution. So I've taken it upon myself to develop a security management consulting approach that helps management articulate what they want to accomplish, put that into a policy, put that into a plan, support the plan with quality training that addresses all the aspects of the policies and the plans, as opposed to the generalization of the content in an auditorium type or training room fashion where everybody gets put in there and they all hear the same thing. My approach is here's the policy, let's review and discuss it. And this training is going to be focused in on that policy. It might be violence prevention. It might be active shooter. It might be separations and terminations. It might be concerning behavior, but it's going to be specifically tied to one component rather generalization.
But you have a book that you've written, Combating Workplace Violence. And in that book, there it is. Hold it up. Let's see. Let's take a look. Combating Workplace Violence. In that book are some of the guidelines and probably a lot of what we just touched on. A lot of what you've just shared is in that book. So what are some key takeaways from your book?
Yes, very good question. So let's distribute responsibility in terms of the employees, supervisors, managers, and the organization. I think that because this is so important, my most important key takeaway is that senior managers own workplace violence prevention from a safety and human resource security perspective. If you're going to say that your employees are your most trusted assets, then treat them that way and
Mhm.
demonstrate your commitment through your investment at the senior level. Develop a policy that touches their hearts. Develop a policy and a plan that's supported, that reinforces the message. Train your direct report managers to understand how he or she feels as the leader of that organization about employee safety and security, and ensure that that part of it becomes an evaluation component at mid-year discussions and at the end of the year, as how was the temperature in your work section? All right, how was the climate? And if the climate was not so bad, not so good, I want to know why. And its direct involvement, train them to be leaders, train them to be intuitive, to be able to see, feel, and sense when an employee is having an issue, and not to step back because you're more concerned with the metrics, and approach the individual and just be a friend. How can I help you? What's going on? And from the workforce perspective, make it easy for them to want to be collaborative. Make them explain to them. Don't treat them like children in a training environment. How we're having the conversation is the way the trainer should communicate this very important content to adults. Here's a situation that we need to impress upon you that's important. We recognize the relationships, but if you see a friend or a loved one or a family member that's a coworker having issues, please let us know with the agreement of the coworker and your friend that we're going to address the problems. Because if not, that you're going to ultimately expose yourself to discipline for failing to report, especially in the aftermath if something goes wrong and you knew. Now we're going to have to deal with you as a victim being
Mhm.
exposed to violent act because you didn't properly report it. So we make it a collaborative effort that's led by leaders. It requires an integration and collaboration of effort and resources so that we all collaborate and execute as a team. And the training is quality training, not check the box. When I say check the box, I don't mean its equivalency to compliance. Compliance has a set of rules and regulations and expectations. I'm talking about someone who has a responsibility for making sure the training gets conducted. They corral all of the adult employees into a training room and they make them take training. That's not the way
Mhm.
you train adults. You train adults by having a conversation with them. So make
I
quality
see.
training, quality supervision, proper management, and showing that you are committed to workforce safety and security will be my key takeaways.
Very good. So, how important is it for the employer to offer, let's say, active shooter training, drills on how to escape the building if something's going on? How important is it to conduct that training?
Active shooter training in the workplace environment is the most proactive level of training that employees need to have. I look at workplace, I look at active shooter involving an employee and employee as a prevention, as a workplace violence prevention responsibility. But when active shooter training is properly conducted, it isn't conducted without management understanding of what the training objectives are and what management's responsibilities are. Now, I don't know whether or not you've ever been to an active shooter training program, but management has responsibility to set up the workplace in a conducive fashion for sheltering in place and for hiding out. There's a responsibility under OSHA to alert, to notify, and communicate, and for the employees to have an ability to alert others of a potential at-risk situation involving an active shooter. And what kind of technology is used? How is that conveyed? All of that needs to be first resolved with management before you decide to train, because the training piece is tied into alert, notification, and communication. It's tied into sheltering in place. It's tied into hiding. So the training approach that I would use, because I'm thinking proactively and outside the workplace, will be comprehensively designed to deal with what do you do and why you do what you're doing, how do you do it, and what is it that's required of you to do it, what are you going to do when there's an encounter that you are not familiar with? How do you handle that? So here's the approach: the police encounter and the employee responsibility. Employee responsibility is to make sure that they're not seen by the shooter. That's one responsibility. Another responsibility that the employee has to live by is to find a hiding place and stay in that hiding place until the all clear that management is responsible for formulating. If an employee sees a police officer whom he believes to be a police officer and they're in their hiding place, stay in that hiding place, because it might be the bad guy who just put on the blouse of the police officer
Mm-hmm.
and he's looking for more victims. If you're going to run away from the individual, don't run in a straight line. If you get seen by the individual, don't stay where you are because he's coming for you. You
Mm.
follow me? Know the difference between a good hiding place, once to be undetected, and a poor hiding place. A poor hiding place is a piece of furniture, or a piece of furniture that a bullet will travel through. A
I
good hiding
see.
place is a brick wall that a bullet won't go through. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
Now, a police encounter, incident to a police response. When the police arrive, I would say psychologically it's going to hurt you because they're not interested in anybody that's wounded initially. The follow-on forces, police forces, when the situation is contained, will take care of those individuals. Their initial responsibility is to control the shooter.
Mm-hmm.
So don't interfere, don't get in their way. And if they encounter you and you have anything in your hand, drop it. And if they tell you to do something, follow their instructions. And don't approach them to have a conversation with you, because those first responding police officers are primarily interested in finding where the shooter is and then suppressing or containing him. So it'll be kind of a comprehensive understanding of personal responsibilities, police responsibilities, and organizational responsibilities, so that, Nikki, so that you feel so confident that if you were in a movie theater, you would know what to do. If you were in a
Right.
shopping mall, you would know what to do. So I try to tie in the training to both emotional, mentally, and physical interaction, so that you know what to do and you're not going to feel like you're abandoned or unsure of what to do next.
Excellent. That's all of that's great. That's some good information right there. So, what are some other resources or that people, our listeners, could use? I know your book is going to be a good one because it's filled with a lot there. But do you have any other resources?
Yes, I would direct anyone listening to get a fundamental appreciation of how to roll out their own programs, and only call Felix if they really need assistance. Is the As Is SHRM Workplace Violence Prevention Standard and the As Is Active Assailant Standard. Those two, if they get those two, the rest will come easy. I can come in and help create a mindset and help them plan and organize their approach so that they'll never need anyone like me in the future. But to get started, uh, find someone who's interested in working in that environment, to read the material, become familiar with the material, and let somebody above them test their knowledge of the material, and then roll it out slowly with a policy and have that policy reviewed by every single level of senior management. Make sure that it contains all of the things that it should contain. My book has it, but the SHRM and as is documents, they certainly give you some examples of what the policy should look like. Don't publish it until legal has reviewed it and legal says that's a good document. Go ahead and let it roll. Don't be afraid. Most folks in the HR community, and God bless them, I love them to death because I work with them closely, are afraid of the details in the content. I say the details and content becomes part of your training vehicle. The more information that the workforce has to train with, the better off we are as an organization because when you're on the witness stand, you're going to have two great witnesses, the employees who said you tried your hardest, and management who's going to say, I did my best because they gave me the best.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then from that policy, develop plans, individual plans for different activities so that you can train to those plans. So
Okay.
my two primary documents are the as-is SHRM Workplace Violence Prevention Standard, and then the as-is Active Assailant Standard.
Okay. So how can people find you if they do need some professional consultation, a professional consultation or advisement?
I'll put it my way, okay, Nikki? If they want a top-notch consultant who listens to their issues and gives them exactly what they need and a little bit more, they should contact Nader Associates, Felix Nader at 516-946-8416 for my New York number. And in the Carolinas, 704-784-0260. And they can read all about me at my website at www.naderassociates.com. And Nader is spelled with a T, Nater. But don't go today because my IT folks are working on my website right now.
Maybe try it just in case. Who knows?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Absolutely.
Well, very good. Do you have any final words you want to say before we sign off here? This has been great.
Yes, I really believe that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If you're a senior manager responsible for safety and security, don't let anybody within your organization tell you that the data doesn't support the need. You have to prepare people for when situations, not if situations, for when situations. Work within your own organizational data. Don't work with somebody else's data. Read the FBI stuff, read what you see in the security world, and apply it to yours. But your data should be the only factor that drives your motivation and your decision making. Don't be confused with risk management. Risk management will tell the CEO, hey, boss, Felix has a great idea, but you know what? It has never happened before here, and it'll never happen again. And then I come along and I say, that's all well and good risk management, but we need to be prepared for the when. Be prepared for the when, because you will create a culture within the organization where the workforce says they are truly, truly caring of my safety and my security.
Mhm. Very good. What a way to
Thank you.
end it. A great episode. Well, thank you again for
My
joining me
pleasure.
on this episode. All right. You take
Thank you very
care.
much. You too. Be
All right.
well.
All right.